So I just thought, before we really get into this, that I'd put a bit of a disclaimer that this is less of a super structured, finely tuned review that goes through everything from start to finish, and more of just a refined rant. It's not just completely unstructured emotion or whatever, but it's like it has a loose-ish structure with kind of segments that will be broken down, but this is much more of me just trying to kind of vent my feelings on the film in a loosely structured way rather than a super detailed review. So there'll be large aspects of the film that I don't talk about a lot in here. This isn't like trying to cover everything. This is mainly just covering the things that really stuck out to me and why I am personally annoyed by this film. So I guess let's just get into this. Jesus fucking Christ. The MCU's Phase 4 is really looking to be an absolute pile of shit. I mean, what was this? Seriously, what was this? Let me preface this somewhat by clarifying a few things, alright? Firstly, I'm not a film snob or a Marvel snob, as I've been called, and I'm not incapable of appreciating light-hearted and fun movies. I'm not someone who requires every film I watch to be an art house masterpiece or the highest of highbrow cinema. I can quite happily go into a film made primarily for the sake of an enjoyable feel-good adventure and even straight-up comedies. I mean, some like The Big Lebowski, Ghostbusters, or Everything Everywhere All at Once can even end up being some of my favourite films. However, where I draw the line is the who cares if the writing, plot, acting and CGI suck, it's fun mentality. I refuse to turn my brain off or completely disengage my natural attempts to process the film I'm watching, just in case I see a flaw or poorly executed element of it. A film can be an enjoyable romp, fine, but if it has genuine issues, they should be pointed out. Secondly, I'm not and never will be part of that crowd who considers Marvel films or superhero films in general to be beneath other genres and incapable of being art or even great movies. MCU entries such as the Captain America films The Winter Soldier and Civil War, 2018's Avengers Infinity War, and even the previous installment of Thor's solo story series Ragnarok, by this same writer-director by the way, genuinely rank amongst my all-time best movies, and I can still thoroughly enjoy watching them now. Disney and Marvel are capable of absolutely incredible work, as they should be when they have almost limitless resources, decades of excellent source material, the best acting and directing talent, and endless cash at their disposal. This is all why I see them as having absolutely no excuse to end up with something like this. Let me be frank with this, okay? They didn't botch some facets but still make a solid feature, like with Guardians of the Galaxy or Black Panther. They didn't make a mediocre, somewhat forgettable film like Ant-Man and the Wasp or Iron Man 2. They didn't even just make a pretty bad film. They made a really, really awful one. I didn't go into this movie wanting this to happen. I had high hopes for the awesome 80s style and character that the trailers and especially the awesome poster make it appear as. I had interest in how the Guardians and other gods would come into the story. The Guardians are basically not even in the film, they're completely insignificant. And I was especially looking forward to Gorr the God Butcherer being adapted, a really awesome villain I learned about a couple of years ago, and he's being played by Christian Bale, a genius casting and one of my favourite actors of all time. I honestly really wanted this movie to be good, and it just wasn't. So now let's get to why. I'll begin by covering the visual and audio aspects. Starting with the visuals, have Disney forgotten that they're one of the richest mega conglomerates on planet Earth? If not, then why the hell is the CGI so lackluster and hit or miss in these movies now? Look, I understand it's an elaborate and arduous process to create all of these digital worlds, but for fuck's sake, they've been doing it sublimely for over a decade. Movies like Infinity War and Endgame blew me away with the effects, so what the hell happened? I mean, not every instance of computer-generated effects here is awful, but most of it is just disappointingly bland and felt extremely uninteresting. There's nothing new or exciting here, not the City of the Gods, not the Shadow Dimension, nothing. So much of it felt cheap and unimpressive, especially the effects for Zeus. Zeus One of the most powerful and dramatic gods in all of mythology? Yeah, that's Zeus. Here, he gets little clouds and throws a stupid metal bolt around. That's basically it. Wow, so impressive. Fucking hell. The aforementioned style and distinct awesomeness of the 80s that this film so brazenly shoves in our faces through the marketing and promotion is straight up non-existent. Seriously, I was expecting a lavishly lit, beautifully coloured and shot ride, the idea of which sold many tickets in the first place, and I get a cheap, generic film with little to no uniquely periodic cinematographic qualities that so defines and drenches others that actually understand the 80s vibe and are oozing with style and character. The only thing oozing from the look of this film is the tears of the poor animators who had to make all this crap, and the complete lack of shits given by Waititi and his cohorts when it came to actually administering and adhering to this aesthetic. However, there was one aspect of the visuals that actually gripped me at first, and that was the presentation of Gorr. Like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness before it, Thor Love and Thunder attempts to give us a villain defined by horror techniques, with lighting, framing, and general cinematography all building this image, and it was paying off. But they didn't commit. Gorr's powers being so entirely represented with shadow and darkness spreading was an inspired visual choice, reminding me of the Vashta Narada from Doctor Who, and playing on the natural human fear of the dark, lending a fitting gothic horror twist to a character like Gorr. However, you cannot imagine my disappointment when, rather than taking this concept to the apex and having some genuine excellence in an otherwise drab visual experience, Waititi instead opted to have these warping shadows and menacing tendrils of darkness turn into shitty, generic CGI monsters that we don't even get a good fucking look at. These monsters pose no real threat, as all our heroes can easily subdue them and don't even have to try, cracking one-liners between cracking their skulls open. And from what we actually see, they aren't even interesting. Giant spider things, how original. The filmmakers came so close to actually doing something good, and at least not falling short of Multiverse of Madness, which is a low bar indeed, and yet they fuck even this up. I guess this proves that Sam Raimi at least had some aspect in his film. Waititi should have asked for his help. So the film fails to create a memorable cinematographic experience, or capitalise on the look of the 80s. Well, what about the sound of it? I think we all know that alongside the vivid visuals, the most beloved aspect of this decade is definitely the musical genres and styles it rocketed out, with smash hit after smash hit releasing and being regarded as legendary classics today. There are even entire genres of music like synthwave, synthpop, retro rave and others which are dedicated to representing an 80s style of sound with modern tech, and I personally love them. Artists such as Gunship, The Midnight, Deadlife and many more rank among my most listened to and adored, so surely they got this part right. Well, it was certainly where the film focused its 80s lens. And by focused, I mean slapping famous song after famous song in seemingly random places, purely to cover up otherwise banal scenes, or to distract you from the glaring issues by saying, hey, remember this cool song you all like? To illustrate my point, let's compare this to Waititi's previous Thor film, Ragnarok, a movie also concerned with presenting itself with a distinct style and vibe. Ragnarok uses Led Zeppelin's The Immigrant Song in several instances, but doesn't spam it, resulting in scenes hugely enhanced by the song's inclusion and making them perhaps the most memorable scenes in the entire film. Meanwhile, Thor Love and Thunder features 3 Guns N' Roses songs, Sweet Child of Mine, Paradise City and November Rain, Enya's Only Time, ABBA's Our Last Summer, as well as songs from artists including Ginger Johnson, Michael Raffio, Dio and more. And where Ragnarok employs the song memorably and sparingly, its successor has no such restraint and fills even the most innocuous or insignificant moments with tune after tune. These are great songs, but I came here for Thor, not to listen to my Apple Music library. Overusing songs like this speaks to a lack of confidence in the film itself, relying instead on tickling the nostalgia lobe, rather than providing a meaningful story that justifies their inclusion. Now, as for the actual soundtrack, I'm sorry, but I don't remember a single track from the OST sticking out to me. I'm a huge film music buff, and Giacchino is one of my favourite composers, who's made masterpieces before, but this soundtrack just didn't stick in my mind at all. I haven't yet listened to it independently, and maybe giving it that chance will let me give the OST my full attention, away from the awful movie, and find something to like. But the fact is that in the cinema, I was completely unmoved by it. And that's a pretty massive shame considering the opportunity they had with both the 80s theme and the legendary composer at the helm. In this respect, Love and Thunder is very similar to Wonder Woman 1984. Did Zimmer and Giacchino share notes or something? A superhero film set in one of the best musical periods of all time. Just phone it in and take inspiration from none of it. Baffling. At least this one didn't abuse Mozart. So the film fails in looks and sounds. Great. Well, how about the characters? Well, let's go through them. Beginning with Thor Odinson himself, I'm disappointed to report that we're still continuing the baffling and annoying trend from Avengers Endgame that Thor should be a completely comedic character, despite now being one of the most tragic characters in the MCU who basically lost everything. I can't emphasize enough how much I miss the darker, maturer take on Thor from Infinity War. He still had funny moments and made jokes, but at the same time we got to actually spend time with him mourning his losses and facing his demons, which ultimately made him one of the most fleshed out and human characters, despite ironically not even being human himself. He was also a massive badass who felt like a god. Those were the days when Marvel were actually capable of balancing humour with drama, rather than having to devote entirely to one or the other and awkwardly slap tonally contrasting scenes next to each other. Here, Thor is still Mr. Funny Joke Man, constantly being the comedic relief and taking nothing seriously in his own film. But one of his main arcs in this movie is essentially pulling himself out of severe depression and inner emptiness. This was so sloppily handled, and just like Fat Thor in Endgame, it just felt rather annoying to see. They seem to think that by simply periodically pointing out that Thor is depressed, miserable, or has lost everything, that this justifies his portrayal as a goof. Why were Clint, Natasha, Tony, Star-Lord, and others given a more serious and mature treatment of their losses and grief, when Thor's is arguably worse than all of them combined? But no, he's still the funny guy. The whole movie, he's like, I'm empty inside because you left me. Lol, I feel nothing. That's like so crazy, guys, Lamel. Fuck off. Speaking of the you in that last sentence, let's talk about Jane Foster. Now, I will give credit where it's due. They didn't make her a completely insufferably woke, massively OP bitch who treats Thor like trash and takes every opportunity to prove herself is better in every way. Despite some incredibly cringeworthy pandering moments and lines of dialogue in particular here, it could have been so much worse, and regardless of my scathing takes on everything else, I'm genuinely grateful and happy for that. Instead, though, she is a multifaceted character, with each facet being somewhat baffling at best and outright weird and shit at worst. Let's just start with the elephant in the room here. Jane has terminal cancer. This is treated more like a standard obstacle to overcome, rather than the depressing, heartbreaking nightmare it would really be. Jane has apparently been going through months of chemo, as she says herself that she found out 6 months ago, but still has her hair and doesn't appear particularly emaciated at any point. This was always going to be a precarious choice in such a silly and nonsensical outing as this, and while they certainly didn't do the worst possible handling of it, it still felt like a very surface level and unrealistic coverage of cancer. And while I appreciated Jane being upbeat and chirpy despite her condition to an extent, it went too far, to the point where it felt like she only really cared about it when the plot needed her to. Worsening this is how other characters react to her revealing her illness to them. Valkyrie seems completely casual about it and jokes about how she can die in battle instead, and Thor says, oh, he's very sorry, Jane, etc., but the furthest thing away from the devastated mess that he should be. After all he's been through, he's just found the first chance at happiness he's had in years, finally rekindling the relationship with the one woman he had a serious one with, who he deeply cares about, and she's just told him that she's got an incurable disease. What's his response? Well, let's live it up while we can. No one knows what tomorrow brings. Yeah, carpe diem, cancer, what? So what does all of this bollocks have to do with her somehow becoming a Thor? Well, basically, the film semi-retcons the loss of Thor and Jane's relationship into being massively more important than it was before, showing us how they spent all this time together, which we never saw, and had a super deep bond, which they didn't have. One night during this period, Jane is sleeping, and Thor is talking to Mjolnir about how much he loves Jane. Yes, he talks to her how much now, we'll come to that later, and tells it that he wants it to always protect her. Somehow, this results in him enchanting Mjolnir without his knowledge, meaning that when Jane developed cancer, the hammer called to her since it can restore her health while she's using it. Seriously? That's the best the writers could come up with? How can Thor even do this? And how does the hammer interpret this as an enchantment? Couldn't this interpret many other things as enchantments, leading to potentially disastrous consequences? Nevertheless, it happens, and this enchantment seemingly means that she can also bypass Odin's original enchantment of worthiness, something that seems like complete bullshit to me. Either that, or you're telling me that having cancer and being a nice person somehow makes you worthy now, which would literally make millions of people worthy. If you're wondering how Jane even has Mjolnir rebuilt to use in the beginning, me fucking too. It just fucking happens. Don't worry, in the plot section, I'll address this more. Before we move on to the Bale-sized hole in this list, let's quickly cover Valkyrie and Zeus. Valkyrie has spent her time since Endgame as King of the Asgardians and being an annoying bint in insurance adverts, and this hasn't seemed to change or mature her in any way. She's basically the same as she was before, save that she misses fighting and is therefore happy to come along with Thor and Jane to fight Gorr. The film hints at her being depressed herself, with her saying her main goal is that she wants to die in battle, and also kind of jokingly saying that she's really fucking miserable, yet also portrays her as loving her position and generally being content, as well as her staying behind after being wounded in case she dies fighting Gorr, which makes little sense. The film also hints at her potentially being gay, but never develops this further, and honestly, I'm pretty thankful for that. Zeus is just fucking weird, man. Wasting the talents of the legendary Russell Crowe, Zeus is a fat, weak god with very unimpressive abilities, as previously mentioned, essentially amounting to him throwing a metal lightning bolt around and teleporting with clouds. He is far from either the romanticized, kind and wise, all-powerful father seen in franchises such as Clash of the Titans, or the original Greek tyrant possessing both extreme power and little care for the unfortunate mortals under his charge, raping, murdering, and even worse wherever he sees fit. This Zeus is just a general useless dickhead that came across as some kind of parody. Now, you could argue that the filmmakers did this intentionally to show Gorr's points about the gods being shit, but Zeus is literally renowned for his evil deeds and ruining any lives he interfered with. Making him fat and weak wasn't necessary at all. Thor literally one-shots him with his own weapon, which the film treats as a MacGuffin they could use when it's then shown to be nothing special when he gets angry. It's revealed in an after-credit scene that Zeus did in fact survive, but the fact that happened to him in the first place is a joke. Okay, so it's time now. Let's talk about Gorr the Butcher, or as I would like to call him, Gorr the Butchered. Seriously, this guy had so much potential to be a Thanos-tier villain, with it not only being an adaptation of an extremely powerful and intimidating comics character, but he's also being played by the best actor in the film. Now, Bale himself was clearly trying, and you can definitely see his talent at times, but there comes a point where casting even the best actor alive couldn't save a character. The MCU's Gorr is just terrible. Firstly, his motivations are shit. His arc revolves entirely around his daughter's death. Gorr and his daughter are enduring the harsh environment of their planet, and despite praying to their god, she succumbs, devastating her father. However, we don't have any investment in these two, and they've just been introduced for the first time. Now, this would be okay if they developed it, but his relationship with his daughter just isn't built up any further through flashbacks or his recounts, like with Thor and Gamora in Infinity War, so it just feels emotionally hollow. In addition, unlike Thanos, Gorr has nonsensical character moments that directly undermine his tragic origins. His moustache-twirling mockery and tormenting of the kidnapped Asgardian children makes no fucking sense, as this should have been a time for him to show that his love for his daughter still defined him, and that while he would terrorize the kids by taking them, he wouldn't kill or hurt them. Instead, he just mocks them, and that's about it. Gorr's main motivation for killing all gods is vengeance for his daughter's death, but an extension of this is that he wants to punish them for their failures. At several points, Gorr talks to various characters like Jane and Valkyrie, and yeah, they really did a bad job with this one, about how the gods have failed them in different ways, but never pushes this point or tries to convince them to join his cause, or at least allow him to complete his mission. It comes across more as meaningless taunting than anything else, which again feels like a waste of potential character conflict and the fucking writing. He then suddenly repents in the finale because, and I'm not making this up, I swear, go and see the film, actually don't, but just take my word for it, Thor gives him a speech that he could choose love and not hate, and this works. Wow. I'll explain the context for this that makes it 50 times worse after I touch on his powers. Another trait Love and Thunder takes from Multiverse of Madness is the power balancing problem for the antagonist for plot convenience purposes, one that Marvel has seemingly lost all control over as it's now infected this villain as well. Gorr is so utterly inconsistent. It's clear that he's been massively nerfed from the source material, as there he's beaten multiple Thors at once, including an all-father Thor, and his sword is capable of taking on Galactus. Now, this might not be a problem, as other powerful antagonists such as Thanos are much weaker than the comic counterparts, but the key is that they're consistent. Gorr is able to kill scores of gods off-screen, some of which surely rivaled Thor in power, and yet Thor is able to at least hold his own, and eventually he and Jane defeat Gorr and break his sword. How? Gorr is able to teleport and has the god-killing blade, and yet he can't defeat Thor? What rubbish. Now, before we finally wrap up these meaty paragraphs and move on to my plot's question, we need to cover one aspect in more detail. Gorr's entire character arc, along with, by extension, Jane's, is made meaningless by the end. Gorr's objective from about halfway through the film, technically from the beginning, and we just don't get told about it, is to get to a place called Eternity, a place which grants the wish of the first being to arrive there. I know, genius writing, right? Another similarity to Wonder Woman 84. Gorr is planning to use his wish to kill all gods. But hang on, I hear you say, isn't this whole thing because Gorr's daughter died? Why doesn't he just wish for her back instead? Well, that's because... Wait, oh, yeah, no, he could just do that, couldn't he? Kind of, you know, undermines his entire fucking reason for fighting the Thors in the first place, and makes Jane's arc redundant as well, because it's her using the hammer that ends up accelerating her cancer and killing her, which she wouldn't have had to keep doing if not for Gorr. So, yeah. And this is exactly what Thor does at the end. He tells Gorr that he isn't searching for revenge, he's searching for love, which is what all of us want, and that he should wish for his daughter back instead, at which point Gorr thinks, shit, yeah, he's got a point, you know, and just does that. What the fuck? Literally watching that in the cinema, I had a moment where I just kind of, everything hit me, I realised it, and I just sat there, kind of mouth half agape, just in utter disbelief of what I'd been watching. Well, that's about that, I guess. It's time for the plot. Now, to shorten this video, which will otherwise end up being like 2 hours long, I'm going to be formatting this in some questions. 25, kind of 26, because one of them's split into half, but keep in mind, this is far from all of them, and all of this is from the top of my head. So, 1. Why is Gorr's god just chilling in a random forest on this planet? 2. Why did he leave the sword he knew could kill him right there in the open? And why the fuck did he tell Gorr what it was before proceeding to give him very good reason to cut his head off with it? 3. Who was the dude who had the sword and was killed? You'd think that would be a pretty important detail, but it literally appears from fucking nowhere apparently. 4. What is the sword and where did it come from? Why did it choose Gorr? Again, you'd think that would be pretty important, but nope. 5. How does the sword work and why does it grant those powers? Not even some fucking exposition? We get exposition about Eternity, but not the sword? Really? Number 6. Why did Gorr know that Eternity could grant wishes, but didn't think to wish for his daughter back? 7. Why doesn't he wish to restore his own health as well, so they can live together? 8. Why didn't Thor try to stop or kill Gorr, so he could use Eternity himself and wish to cure Jane, or even more? I mean, he could wish to bring back everyone who's died from his past. Are you seriously telling me that he'd rather let Gorr live, you know, the guy who just got his fucking girlfriend killed? Number 9. Why does Thor rely on the 0% guarantee of the maniacal god killer's conscience to save the entire fucking universe? I mean, yeah, these are universe stakes. Thor talks about how putting the other gods out of commission could basically end the fucking universe, but he's like, nah, I'm sure this guy's alright really, I'll talk to him. 10. Why does Gorr suddenly trust Thor, a god, and the guy he was trying to kill 5 minutes ago, who just lost his lover thanks to Gorr's actions, to look after his beloved daughter he just did all of this for? 11. Why does Thor just agree and adopt the girl rather than just keeping her safe and have her be looked after by Valkyrie or someone else? 12. Why does Thor suddenly want to be this girl's uncle and love her so much, and she's literally the kid of the guy who got Jane killed? 13. If Zeus could survive the thunderbolt through him, why even have him be so weak as to be damaged in the first place? Why couldn't they have, gotten away some other way, or some kind of good writing that would have prevented that situation even occurring in the first fucking place? 14. Why was the journey to eternity built up by Zeus as this impossible task when it's apparently super easy to just go there? Seriously, this is Exegol from Rise of Skywalker levels of dumb. Zeus is like, he'll never make it, but then Thor goes there multiple times, and it's so easy apparently that we don't even need to be shown his return there. It's just assumed that the audience can understand, yeah, he could easily just come back. What the fuck? 15. How did Zeus even fucking know about this? This is how Thor and Co find out, from Zeus, so how the fuck did Zeus know? 16. Why didn't Gorr just focus on killing Thor and taking Stormbreaker rather than the elaborate trap? Refresher, the fucking Bifrost is all he needed to open the gate, and it's apparently that fucking easy to get to Eternity's Gate that if Gorr had just, killed Thor in the fucking first place, which he easily could have done if he didn't run away and kidnap the children as an elaborate trap just to get the fucking hammer to the gate, then he could have just gone straight the fuck there and killed all the gods without anyone even being able to stop him. What the fuck? 17. How did Stormbreaker magically free the heroes when Thor called it to him? And question 18. Why the fuck couldn't Gorr stop this? Gorr was literally telling him to call the axe, and he didn't anticipate it magically freeing him and making him have to fight all three of them at once, rather than, I don't know, just him catching the axe or something. Number 19. Why did it take Gorr so fucking long to open the gate to eternity after he took Stormbreaker? What was the delay? 20. Why didn't the gang leave straight away once they were freed? They end up leaving anyway as soon as Valkyrie is hurt for some fucking reason, so they clearly thought the children would keep until they got back, which in itself is a ludicrous thing, but why the fuck didn't they just leave straight away if Jane was going to go, oh no, one of us has been somewhat hurt, we have to leave now, it's not like we're here for a fucking reason, our lives are much more important than the lives of all these kids in the fucking universe now. What the hell? Number 21. Why didn't Gorr kill the kids once he got Stormbreaker? He clearly didn't care what happened to them, since they would have died if not for Thor. This big fucking rock nearly falls and crushes them, and it would have done if not for Thor. So you can't argue that Gorr, couldn't bring himself to kill the kids. He clearly didn't care. Just fuck off. 22. How the fuck can Mjolnir now magically reassemble itself? Why wasn't this possible when Hela destroyed it? Doesn't this completely undermine the events of Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War and Endgame? This is so fucking huge, it takes it takes a little while to think about the ramifications of this. If Mjolnir could have reassembled itself at any time to a worthy handler, then why the fuck did it even not just do that as soon as Hela broke it? Why? It just completely undermines the entire fucking point of Ragnarok, where Thor discovers and kind of finds his powers in himself, and it ruins this whole thing in Infinity War where Thor has to get Stormbreaker because he needs a weapon powerful enough to kill Thanos, and Mjolnir might have worked if not for the fact that it was gone. Like, are you actually fucking kidding me? Jesus Christ. And this isn't even the end, guys. This isn't even the end. Number 23. How can Thor now suddenly enchant Uru weapons and cast spells like Odin? The whole plot hinges on this, and it's never explained. Odin is insanely powerful. He's the Allfather in the comics, and keep in mind this is against the comics version of Thanos, who's much stronger than the MCU version. The fact that Thanos can fight Odin and actually not die is considered a very impressive feat for Thanos, and Odin compliments him, calling him the strongest foe he's fought in, I don't know how long it was, like millennia or whatever, but Odin still wins pretty easily. There's a reason why Odin died before Thanos came for the stones. It's because Thanos knew that Odin could fuck him up. But now Thor can just suddenly do some of Odin's stuff without learning or anything. Could he always do this? Was this somehow because of the stupid lightning bolt thing? But how would he know how to do that? And why wasn't that explained? Oh my god. He fucking casts spells on these stupid kids at the end, turning them all into mini Thors. He could have done that to an entire army in Infinity War. What the fuck? Still not the end. Still not the end. 24. How could the kids suddenly effortlessly fight and kill these CGI monsters once given powers? Didn't they still have to know what they're doing? And number 25, why were there even so many weapons lying there anyway? I mean, I know one of them literally uses a fucking teddy bear that goes full Homelander on them, but I swear there were like loads of actual weapons, swords and shit lying around. I mean, why? Why? Why wouldn't Gorr at least get rid of them? And finally, for the last question, number 26. How the fuck did Mjolnir break the Necro Sword? It blocked Uru weapons before, both of them at once, and what suddenly changed? And how? And, you know, keep in mind, this also links into Gorr himself. How the fuck does Gorr go from being able to beat Thor, Jane, and Valkyrie all at once, even winning, but now against just those two, and Jane is in a somewhat weaker state, he loses? Oh right, it's because Thor needs to win now. Now these are just some of the main queries I have. There are far more things I could ask, but I guess I should conclude this rant. In general, there's much more I could talk about. I didn't really touch on how awful the humour is, for example. Just to give a quick one that's one of the main ones, Thor talks to his hammers, and there's this super cringeworthy running gag of him treating Mjolnir like an ex-girlfriend, and Stormbreaker is his jealous current girlfriend. No, seriously, he constantly talks to them, and it makes me want to retch from cringe. It's just awful. There are so many, just countless, unfunny, awful jokes that felt like a schoolboy wrote them, and it just totally undermined the movie. Honestly, this is one of the worst plots in a film ever. I wouldn't even excuse this on an animated kids show, let alone a blockbuster set in a huge established universe, acting as the sequel to some of the best written films, not even best written, but just well written, just good films, and it fucks up this bad. Like, how is that possible from the same writer-director? It has one of the worst finales and endings that I've ever seen. It pisses all over these characters that had so much potential after Avengers Endgame. You know what? I don't even want to think about it anymore right now. So I'll just wrap it up by saying that if this, Multiverse of Madness and Black Widow are the kinds of MCU films we can expect from now on, I'm out. Really, I'm fucking out. Like, I might go and see them, but in terms of actual investment in this world, I'm fucking out, man. Like, what reason is there to put up with this shit? It's not like we don't have the comics and all of that good stuff left. Like, the MCU is just, as far as I'm concerned, one little piece of the overall Marvel world. So it's, you know, this isn't the end of Marvel if it's the end of the MCU, but it's certainly a giant fucking shame. I mean, I've been a fan of this saga since its 2008 beginnings with Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk. It brings me no pleasure to see it in this state. However, I have standards. Alright, I will not lap up absolute wank like this in order to lie to myself and pretend like every Marvel film is good. I'm sorry, they're just not. Literally the only good Marvel film I can remember seeing since Endgame was No Way Home, and that was carried so fucking hard by the actual use of legacy characters and all of the actors that they included there. And in fact, I can kind of tell that if No Way Home didn't have all of that in it, it would probably be near this level with the writing. I mean, Far From Home was certainly a fucking disaster. That's my opinion. A more controversial one, I know, but I really hate that film. The writing was terrible. Well, it's sad. It is really sad, but Thor Love and Thunder is complete and utter shit. It hurts to say that, but it is the truth. As I said, this was a more kind of loosely structured, kind of rambly kind of rant video, but hopefully you did enjoy it. Obviously you can tell it was still scripted, but it was just not really ordered the same. So hopefully you still glean something from it. Let me know what you think about the current state of the MCU in general, as well as Thor Love and Thunder specifically in the comments. Let me know if you agree with me about the writing and everything, or if you actually enjoyed the film. There is nothing wrong with you enjoying the film. You know, if you love it, that's fine. Obviously, I'd rather that you actually gave reasons or, like, arguments for it, rather than just doing what people have been doing, which is either calling me a snob or just saying, you know, you take superhero movies too seriously. It's like, no, mate, we just have standards. That's all there is to it. So, yeah. I'll wrap this up now. This has been Morset, and I'll see you in the next video.